I've been invited to join the Wastes SMP. There's just one problem. They need a custom world to play in. I'll be transforming the overworld into a desolate Wild West with a hostile surface, scarce resources, and a deadly underground. Over 40 other creators are counting on me to create the setting for our adventure into the wasteland. So let's get started. After speaking with Emchmu, the host of the SMP, I have a list of things this dimension needs to achieve to ensure this experience is fun and successful. It's too long to go into detail right now, but here's the broad strokes. First off, I have a short list of biomes that we want included on the surface, including the Eroded Badlands, deserts, and Windswept Savannas. We'll be making at least some changes to all these biomes, but these are the general ideas and visuals that Emchu wants for this SMP. Additionally, to help sell the hostile nature of the wastes, we don't want any water here on the surface. In theory, there should and will be plenty of water underground. We don't want it to be completely inaccessible, but ideally we want players to have to work for it. However, I did have the idea to still include the terrain that would normally be filled with oceans, these empty basins that will decorate much like the rest of the wasteland. Now, Emchmu wants most of the underground pretty preserved close to vanilla. We're still going to have lush caves, dripstone caves, and the deep dark, and most of the rest of the underground should be the same kind of empty, barren caves that we're used to. However, she does want ancient cities, and by extension the deep dark, to be a much more common and significant factor of the deep underground. And so, to accommodate this, I am going to make the dimension much lower, about 64 blocks deeper, for the deep dark to pretty much completely cover. I've also gotten the okay to add one custom cave biome, though it won't be particularly extreme. In addition to more common ancient cities as well as mine shafts, Emchu also still wants shipwrecks and ocean ruins to generate in the oceans, as well as abandoned villages for the deserts and windswept savannas, along with a handful of other structures that we would expect to find in a wasteland. I'm excited to get to work on these biomes, but before we can make any progress there, I need to create the terrain that is going to be able to support them. Welcome to the wastes. We got sand, we got dead bushes, we got dry grass, and that's about it. So far, I only have the terrain shaped, and then I'm overlaying a very basic biome over the top of where the real biomes will ultimately be before I actually fill in all their features. You see, the way that Minecraft worldgen works, we can't just have a biome like the Badlands, for example, and say, okay, anywhere where there's Badlands, we want a lot of these tall hills and mountains and these neat little like cliffs and pillars to generate. That would be too intuitive. We have to do it a little bit backwards. So we form the terrain and then we map the biomes to where the terrain matches what we want from them. So anywhere where you do see these nice tall hills and cliffs that have these pillars and things around, that is where the Badlands will ultimately generate, but right now it's just the same desert as everywhere else. All of these dunes with relatively flat areas between them are going to be the actual desert. These super tall, crazy cliffs like this are where we're going to get the windswept savannas. And we have these large gorges where the terrain dips down into what would have been an ocean basin, but the sea level has been moved all the way down to the bottom of the world so that we don't have any water. Some of this, specifically the oceans, is pretty much just the vanilla terrain, though I have made some slight modifications I'll get to in a moment, but all of the surface up here, as well as the Badlands areas and the windswept savannas and such, all of that terrain is all custom using something called splines. You see, where many people would expect Minecraft to generate its terrain by overlaying several noise maps like this one onto each other and just converting that into a height map, it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. We do have noise maps like this, but they aren't just converted one-to-one into the terrain. Instead, we use a density function called a spline to say, okay, for every area on this noise map where the noise is such and such value, say 0.1, output a value of, let's say, 5. And then anywhere where the noise is 0.5, output a value of 2, and so on and so forth. We create basically a list of all the different noise values that we care about, and then the spline creates a nice, smooth interpolation from all of those specific points that we've laid out across that noise map. So while much of the time this does correlate to a rough progression from low noise to high noise for oceans to regular terrain up to mountains, this isn't necessarily always the case, and it's especially important for things like the mushroom islands, which of course appear in the middle of oceans. The spline checks for particularly low noise values to create the ocean, but when the noise gets at its most extreme, instead of continuing to make the terrain deeper, it juts it up much higher to create that island way out in the middle of the ocean. And then there are some rules that allow the mushroom island biome to be placed specifically on those islands. There's a little bit more to it than that. There's actually 4 noise maps that are relevant for terrain generation, and we actually combine 3 different splines together to create the final shape of the terrain. One spline controls these general regions, these low areas of ocean, to the relatively flat areas all the way up to mountains way far away. One of the other splines adds a little bit of jaggedness to particular parts of the terrain, namely where we would expect peaks and things to generate. And then one final spline is overlaid on top of those to influence the degree to which some further random noise affects the terrain. The last thing I'll mention about the surface terrain is that for the Wastes SMP, there's going to be a 2000 by 2000 world border. So I've shrunk the size of the noises that get used for terrain generation. This will hopefully allow oceans, Badlands, Windswept savannas, and of course the deserts to all be able to appear within this relatively small area without needing to have, an entire sector, an entire quadrant of that 2000 by 2000 box being entirely ocean or entirely desert and so on. Everybody should be able to find everything they need and even several instances of the things that they need within the world border. Going underground, we'll find that the noise caves are way larger and more common here than in the vanilla overworld, and that was another specific request by Mchu. The previous 30-day SMP that she hosted, the Caves SMP, was of course in a custom cave dimension, though not the Dwarf Hollow, unfortunately. And so it feels fitting that all the creators should be able to take full advantage of a lot of space in the caves. But of course, being able to gather all these stone and ores and things is also very important, so I've made sure that there's still plenty of terrain for those to generate. Though, naturally, some things are going to be a little bit less common just by virtue of there being some less terrain. This will hopefully be helped by the fact that I've already made the dimensions 64 blocks lower, and this entire lower section pretty much is deep dark biome. Because cave biome generation is relative to the depth from the surface, calculated from the very top of the terrain and going down, it does mean that in warm oceans specifically, the terrain dips a little bit low enough that the deep dark doesn't always generate in the entire 64 block space that I've added, but pretty much everywhere else it should, and we'll still get deep dark appearing higher up than minus 64 underneath mountains and things, just like in vanilla. This will provide some extra terrain for more ores, though right now we're only getting diamond, redstone, and I think a little bit of gold because those ores happen to have height ranges that already go down below minus 64. We'll need to do a lot more down here to make this interesting, but this should already make those ancient cities able to generate more commonly. For now though, let's return to the surface and start planning what kind of features we want to fill the most prominent biome here in the Wastes, the desert. Of course, being in a desert, we are going to want cacti, and where I'm from, there's actually a wide variety of cacti, even though in Minecraft we only have this one type of block. So I'm thinking I'm going to have some cacti generate as little barrel cacti, just a single block, and they'll either have a cactus flower on top or a zero light block so that they're not able to grow up without some help. But we won't just have those. Of course, we'll also have some regular sized cacti, maybe between 3 blocks and 4 blocks high, and those will also have a chance for some cactus flowers on top. And I'd also really love to have some really tall saguaros, maybe 5 to 7 blocks tall. Those will be much less common, and of course, they don't really look like normal saguaros since they won't have any arms. We can't really do that in vanilla Minecraft, but I'll know they're saguaros, and that's what matters to me. Now, out here in the wasteland, wood is understandably going to be sparse, and that's the way it should be. Mchu has made it clear to me that even in the windswept savannas, when we get over there, we do want wood to be relatively uncommon. However, wood does still need to be accessible, and so after talking for a little bit, we decided that we're going to try and replicate something along the lines of petrified wood. These will appear as small sideways logs that are up here on the surface, kind of lying down like they might have fallen, but not quite as thin as fallen logs. They should be almost like large boulders. Out in the western US, which in fairness is not necessarily what we're specifically trying to replicate here, but nevertheless serves as a useful template, petrified wood are trees, logs that have been mineralized, that have undergone a sort of fossilization to turn into stone. We'll probably factor that in somehow by having some of the blocks be turned into some kind of a stone variant, but there will still be wood here to be collected, because players need wood in order to progress. We're sort of mixing authentic realism and survival gameplay necessity. In that same vein, I plan to have some kind of a boulder or similar of granite able to appear on the surface. These will be much larger than the petrified wood, and probably the petrified wood won't actually be granite. We might change that to something else that looks a little bit nicer and more distinct from these boulders that we'll create. This serves no practical function and just helps to break up the surface of the terrain by making it a little bit less barren and particularly less kind of white and pale. Having these nice darker colors to contrast will make it easier for one to navigate and just nicer to look at in general, especially with my shaders. One feature that is going to be gameplay related is clay. I'm going to place clay relatively commonly under the surface, since in this dimension there aren't actually any rivers for it to generate, dry or otherwise. Both where I'm from in the US as well as where Mchu is from in Australia, there is clay at or just below the surface, and so this is relatively realistic and also very fun and interesting, allowing players to access clay for bricks and things. Since of course they aren't going to need it for terracotta, because we'll have the Badlands to take care of that. I'll go ahead and get to work on getting all these features together, get Mchmu's approval, and then show you guys. Everything is looking good, so let me show you guys how I put all this together. Starting off with the cacti, as promised, we do have several barrel cacti that have either cactus flowers or invisible light blocks over them, so that they will only ever be 1 block tall unless they are moved. And then a mixture of these more normal sized cacti as well as the much taller saguaros here. For the barrel cacti, as well as a mixture of the more regular sized cacti, these appear everywhere in the desert, but for these more dense ones here of the taller cacti and saguaros, I'm using a noise-based count placement modifier. This means that you'll have some areas where the cacti are really dense like this, and then you'll have others where they are pretty sparse, just relying on the other feature. And this creates some really cool cacti forests like this. With Mchmu's approval, I've also added a really fun secret here in the form of creaking. Underneath some of these cacti, creaking hearts will generate, allowing creaking to spawn in these forests at night. They're pretty rare, and they'll specifically only spawn in these forest areas. The cacti block column feature that has the creaking heart cannot spawn as part of the other feature that gets placed throughout the rest of the desert biome. But of course, you can still have creaking hearts that generate near the edges of these forests, so you might need to be a little bit careful as you approach them. Mchmu and I both agreed that this should be a really fun surprise for the Wastes SMPers. Next, let's talk about these granite spikes here. I opted to go with a spike shape rather than boulders for 2 reasons. First off, I happen to have them lying around from when I stole them from Incendium for my vegetation patch feature video. I think they look really cool, and I've adapted them from the toxic heaps to just be made out of granite up here on the desert surface. But the other reason is that I genuinely think they look really awesome here. They add some great verticality to the biome that boulders just wouldn't necessarily. They would feel kind of out of place, and I don't know, I think that these unique shapes just add so much more character. I'm using a noise-based count for these as well, so they will only generate wherever the cactus forests are not. So you have kind of 2 distinct sub-biomes within the single desert biome, the cactus forests and the granite fields. I've also added one feature specifically so that Nice Name doesn't come after me, and made it so that these granite spikes actually do descend down into the ground a little ways until they hit the stone, since it wouldn't make sense for them to just be sitting on the surface of the sand. For the petrified wood, I've opted to use dripstone blocks instead of granite for what some of the wood blocks get replaced with, because I think that just ends up looking a lot nicer and more close to real petrified wood as far as coloration. But I've added one additional feature that I think Nice will be pleased with, which is that they can have quartz in them too. Quartz is one of the resources that Mchmu wanted me to very specifically make sure was accessible here in the wastes, because in the caves, people didn't tend to enjoy going to the nether. Understandably, they wanted to stay in the custom dimension, because that was the cool part. While it doesn't necessarily make sense for these blocks to be blocks of quartz visually, because these of course look like very clearly like they're man-made, it does make sense technically for quartz to be here, because as part of the mineralization that real petrified wood undergoes, they can become quartz. As you might have seen, I've also added a recipe so that you can turn blocks of quartz back into regular nether quartz if you need to do so for any redstone purposes. I'm handling the petrified wood using fossil features and feature stacking, both of which I've talked about in a recent video. Basically, I'm placing a block way up in the sky as a sort of marker block, and then checking for the existence of that block to place first a disk of light about 6 blocks above the surface, and then on top of that, a fossil feature that gets projected 6 blocks down, so that it's a little bit depressed into the ground. You'll see that it is a little bit larger than this, more like a true giant log. Another feature then removes that disk of light that is above it, as well as the marker block. Fossils are a very unique feature in that they can place a structure file, which is what this is. In fact, it's 2 structure files. One that is the stripped oak logs, and one that is the dripstone blocks and the quartz blocks that get overlaid on top of it. It's a bit of a hack, but it gives me way more control over the shapes that we get. And we even have some petrified wood. Let's see if we can find one. Yeah, very rarely you can find a petrified wood structure that is way bigger. So this is going to be a great source of not only wood, but also that quartz. I think the desert is looking really awesome, so it's time to move on to the Badlands and the Windswept Savanna. Neither of these biomes are going to have very many changes from vanilla. I suspect that this is an area that is going to be eroded Badlands, and most of that visual is handled by, of course, the terrain itself, which is already done, as well as the surface rule. Surface rules differ from features in that they are placed before features and just replace the base terrain block, in this case stone, with whatever block you define. It doesn't even need to be on the surface. Surface rules are handling both the sand and sandstone that's appearing here right now, as well as the deep slate layer underground. So making these Badlands look like Badlands is mostly just a matter of adding that surface rule from the vanilla dimension back into this one. However, I'm probably going to make a few additional changes. For one, because we specifically and only want the eroded Badlands biome, there isn't going to be any red sand by default, or at least it's going to be very uncommon. So we'll need to add that back in. I should be able to modify the surface rule to handle that mostly, but I suspect I'll need to use some features as well to help make it just fully work out and make sure that there's enough red sand and it looks nice with the terracotta of the eroded Badlands. Of course, we also want some cacti here. I'll probably just carry over the basic cactus feature that handles the barrel and tall cacti, rather than also having the cactus forest generate in the eroded Badlands, because I feel like that would take away from what this biome specifically has to offer. And although it doesn't make a lot of sense geologically, I do think it would be nice if the Badlands surface rules extended just a little bit deeper underground. Not super duper far, probably just to kind of the tops of these ceilings here of these large noise caves, but just to add, again, a little bit of character to this area while still keeping the core of the underground vanilla. Windswept savannas are probably going to have even fewer changes. Of course, their terrain is already pretty significantly different from vanilla windswept savannas, and I think that's probably fine, though of course we'll still get approval on that. The main things that we want to keep in mind for the windswept savanna are that the trees should not have leaves, though we'll still make them about as common as they are in vanilla. And we're probably going to want pumpkins to generate more often here, since these shattered terrain areas are a little bit smaller than vanilla and of course aren't surrounded by regular savannas. So let's go ahead and implement these 2 classic biomes. If you're enjoying the video, please remember to like and subscribe for more custom world gen, structures, and data pack content. If you're watching this, then the Wastes SMP has already started, and there are over 40 other creators making videos exploring this custom world, so be sure to check them out with the links in the description. And if you'd like to support the channel and get early access to some of the other projects that I make here, please consider joining my Patreon. I would say that this Windswept Savanna is sufficiently destitute. It almost feels kind of haunting seeing all these trees without any leaves, but thankfully they do still supply their wood, so this will be a very important biome to locate for the Wastes SMPers. We do have plenty of pumpkins appearing in small patches here, though I'm not using the random patch feature type, I'm just placing them with a simple block feature type and having them spread around using the placement modifiers. A trick I've become more accustomed to after more conversations with Uni in the Stardust Labs Discord. There isn't a whole lot else to discuss here as far as changes, but I did take this opportunity to implement another feature that Mjmu specifically requested. Here in the Windswept Savanna, as with most biomes in the vanilla overworld, we get small patches of dandelions and poppies that are relatively rare. However, if you bone meal the grass here, or in fact anywhere in the waste dimension, you can get other types of flowers. I'm getting very unlucky and getting a bunch of poppies and dandelions, but as you can see, we're also getting some orange tulips as well in this area. As we go elsewhere in the biome, then we get some what I think are pink tulips, yep, and then we can come over here, bone meal some more. We get some more poppies, of course, those are still going to be probably the most common, but then we can come over this way, get some red tulips, some lilies of the valley, and even tall flowers like peonies. The trick to do this was actually a little bit more confusing than I expected. You see, when you bone meal grass or use bone meal on just about anything, it's actually placing a few features at that location. These are very specific named features that if you overwrite, you can change what feature actually gets placed when you bone meal. So I've replaced the flowers default feature that normally gets used so that it uses a noise provider, much like you would expect when you bone meal the grass in a flower forest, and made it include all of the types of flowers, not just all the small ones. This means that in certain areas of the world, you will only ever be able to grow poppies from bone mealing the grass there, but elsewhere you'll only be able to grow pink tulips, or peonies, or sunflowers, and so on. However, it wasn't quite as simple as that, because of course I still wanted the regular poppies and dandelions to generate in this biome, so I made a separate feature that was just a recreation of the regular vanilla flower default feature and placed it here. However, interestingly, just doing that didn't change the bone meal behavior. As it happens, it seems like I have to actually still include the vanilla flower default feature in the biomes that I want that bone meal behavior to apply to. So I've done so and simply made it so that it has a count of 0, so it is never able to place in this biome, or any biome. Moving on to the Badlands, as you can see, it has been pretty sufficiently transformed by primarily those surface rules. That's what's handling all these bands of terracotta that are noise-based on the seed. I did make some slight modifications so that based on some noise, we also get these patches of red sand, or really kind of swirls of red sand around the low areas of the terrain. So we won't have any up here on these plateaus or anything, but they might stretch a little bit up these hills like we have right here. Now, technically, that surface rule for the red sand is only handling that very top layer, which understandably would look quite bad going up these pretty rocky hills. So I'm placing a vegetation patch feature in every chunk of this biome that then places a vegetation feature of a 0 size disk. This is because vegetation patch features, while very powerful, can only replace some group of blocks with a single other block type. I could replace all terracotta with red sand, but I can't replace all red sand with a mix of red sand and red sandstone, for example, and certainly not based on specific rules. That's where the disk feature comes in. The vegetation patch replaces all of the red sand that it can find on the surface with red sand, places a 0 size disk feature underneath it that then replaces the blocks underneath that top surface with either red sand or red sandstone if there is red sand 2 blocks above it. which creates a more natural progression of soft upper surface to stony below surface as the red sand progresses down until it hits the terracotta again still. So on really steep cliffs like this, it does still look a little bit off, but not quite so bad as if it was just a layer of red sand sitting on top here. More importantly, it means red sand and red sandstone are reasonably accessible here in the Eroded Badlands, and there's a place for the cacti to generate, which I've also added, again, just using the same feature as I did for the base cacti in the desert biome. Pretty much everything else here is unchanged, so let's move on to planning the dry ocean basin. Right now, the ocean basins are extremely empty. Unlike the deserts up there, we don't have any dead bushes or anything, so it's making it much more obvious that we have a lot of work to do here. Another block that Mchmu specifically wants to make accessible is mud, and I think that this is the right biome for it. I'll probably make much of the surface of this biome made of mud so that players are able to access it relatively easily without needing to rely on particularly water, which of course is not very accessible here. Now, of course, this isn't going to be enough to populate the seafloor here, so I think it makes plenty of sense, since the rest of the dimension is desert and other warm biomes, for there to be lots of dead coral here. The coral features that vanilla uses in the warm ocean for the coral reefs aren't configurable, and they actually don't even generate outside of water, so I can't place them and then replace their blocks with some other feature like discs. I'll need to recreate their shapes using other features or get something relatively close to them, probably using trees because they're one of the most robust and configurable feature types. Then I can find a way to place the other coral types on top of and around these so that they look truly like the regular vanilla coral reefs, just completely dead on the surface of this dry ocean basin. I'll probably need to add some other features since there isn't going to be a lot else visually exciting going on here. Maybe some of the dry grass instead of what would be kelp and seagrass. Not sure exactly how that's going to look, so I'll play around with it and let you guys know what I came up with. Alright, this didn't quite turn out the way that I was hoping it would, but it does achieve the vision. There isn't really a lot of visual excitement going on here, but there certainly is some, and it's okay that there isn't a ton because of course this is a wasteland. The first and most obvious thing you may notice is these spikes of prismarine. We're handling these exactly the same way as the granite spikes in the desert, and they're just using a weighted state provider to change between prismarine blocks or these sea lanterns so that they can be accessible. Originally, Mchmu wanted prismarine, of course, to be accessible, and so our thinking was we would have a custom prismarine cave. But I decided that because the warm oceans needed something more to kind of break it up, I would just go ahead and incorporate the prismarine here, and I think it works a lot better than a prismarine cave would have. Now, these alone aren't enough, of course, to help populate the terrain here, so as planned, I do have the dry grass, both short and tall, and I also kept the sea pickles here as well. Since they aren't waterlogged, they don't have their lights, so they do actually look, I think, sufficiently dead, and it serves as a nice source of them for when players do start to acquire water. They can use them for lights or whatever else they want to use them for. I'm pretty sure they can be smelted into dye or something like that, so at least there's that. There isn't a lot of coral over here in this particularly deep area, and that's because I've made the coral noise-based, much like the granite spikes, so as we travel to different areas, then we'll start to see it a little bit more often. We've got 3 different shapes. These bulbs here, which are using a very short, straight tree trunk provider, and then a cherry foliage provider that always empties the corner, replaces the corners of the leaves with air to create this nice little dome. We have a simple forking trunk type with no foliage. This is what's used for acacia trees, and I'm simply having it place all the various coral blocks instead of acacia logs. And then I have this feature that's using a mangrove root placer with no trunk, or at least a very short trunk, to have these kind of winding, spindly legs, almost like a claw reaching into the ground. There's a separate feature for each of these shapes that uses a different block type, a different dead coral block, to make up either the trunk or the foliage. I have a feature that randomly selects between the 3 different shapes, and then those shapes then randomly select between the 5 different block types. I'm particularly proud of how I handled all the dead coral and dead coral fans on top and around all of these features. Mangrove trees introduced the place on leaves decorator type for trees, which is what I'm using for these bulb shapes. And the introduction of the fallen tree feature type also introduced the place on log decorator type for both fallen trees and the regular tree feature type. So this allows me to define for every north face on a log on any of the trunks for these features, I attempt to place, I think about 30% of the time, a north-facing brain coral fan, or dead horn coral fan, or dead bubble coral fan, and so on. The same is true for all the faces of the foliage on this feature type, including the top face for the regular dead coral, and of course the top-facing dead coral fans. It's the kind of thing that is technically really cool, but is probably going to go unnoticed by most of the Waste SMPers. Now, the biggest thing you might notice is that there isn't any mud here, and that's because it looked really bad. Mud is a really nice looking block, but it's just way too high of contrast with all of the surrounding sand. It didn't work whether I made the entire surface of the ocean mud, and it didn't work if I made it only partial either. It was just really ugly and quite an eyesore. So instead, I've moved the mud underground, below the oceans, using a waterlogged vegetation patch feature so that we also get these really awesome puddles of water that are completely enclosed. This should allow mud to remain quite common and accessible by just finding more motion and digging down, and it should even be accessible in even greater quantities just by virtue of having a little bit more surface area because of all these doubled up sections where the cave splits into layers. I also realized, and so took the opportunity to rectify the fact that we hadn't actually planned anywhere for sugarcane to generate. Since there's no water on the surface, there wouldn't be anywhere for sugarcane to even be rare, and so I decided to incorporate it as part of the vegetation patch feature here so it can generate beside all the water underneath the oceans. It is perhaps a little bit too common. It certainly doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for there to be sugarcane down here since there isn't any light breaking through, but I did want to make sure that players were able to access sugarcane for all of their enchanting or book writing needs, and this should make sure that there is plenty to go around. While we're done in the caves, let's get to work on the one remaining cave biome that I still need to create. You see, Mchmoo still wants mushroom fields, or at least mycelium and mushrooms, and so I think a mushroom cave is the best place for it. There really isn't going to be any better place on the surface since we don't have those nice islands in the middle of the oceans. Probably not going to do anything too crazy here. We'll have, of course, still plenty of the giant brown and red mushrooms, as well as these small red and brown mushrooms that'll be able to generate all throughout the mushroom caves biome. However, because we do want mushrooms to spawn down here, I do plan to add some discs of light just above the surface that'll hopefully help prompt mushrooms being able to spawn. Please excuse my mod loadout changing the particle texture that light blocks end up using. This is going to make the mushroom caves look really nice, I hope. Nice and pretty and beautiful and lit up, and of course is going to allow those mushrooms and their wonderful meat and mushroom stew to be accessible. Should be an easy task, so let's get to work. Although it's kind of plain, something about this biome just feels so magical. I really like it. It's always a great feeling putting mushrooms underground. It just feels like they belong here. Now the light blocks are quite conspicuous. You can see plenty of glowing areas where the light blocks are just a little bit above the surface. Unfortunately, I don't see any mushrooms spawning, and they should definitely be able to spawn. I have regular animal mob spawning turned on. Oh, there's a few. Wonderful. Okay, great. So they're probably going to be a little bit rare, in particular because A, they're a little bit lower down in the world, B, there's just not a ton of light. There is certainly some, so they're able to spawn, but they're not going to be everywhere. And C, of course, there are animals up on the surface. Of course, in the vanilla overworld, the animal mob cap doesn't necessarily get taken up as quickly by things like rabbits and camels and things when you're near a mushroom fields biome because you're so far away generally from other biomes that have those animals. But here, of course, we're sharing the chunk space with biomes that do have those other kinds of animals, and so it is going to limit the spawning space for mushrooms. Nevertheless, the light blocks are doing what they're supposed to, so I am satisfied with them, and they just add a really cool ambiance to this biome. Now I've made it so that these mushroom cave biomes aren't able to descend much lower than -64, so even though in these warm ocean biomes the deep dark biome doesn't extend too far up above the bottom of the world, we're still going to incorporate some other features to fill this kind of underground extra space that's added by making the dimension deeper. Before I do that though, I think it's about time that I implement all those structures that Mjmu wants to be able to spawn here. Let's start in the oceans. I've made it so that both warm and cold ocean ruin variants are able to spawn at the seafloor of the oceans per Mjmu's request. They will still have the drowned right when the world generates, but those will very quickly die from the sun exposure. They do look a little bit strange outside of water. I suspect the way that their generation is handled, the water helps to make sure they generate a certain way or supports them somehow, so we do get these kind of weird gaps where they're floating a little bit or something. I've also made sure that shipwrecks are able to generate here, though I've made it so that they are always beached, which is just a true or false boolean in the shipwreck structure type that decides whether it is filled with a bunch of sand and partially buried under the ground or not. I did try initially having some shipwrecks not beached, but they just end up kind of floating above the ground, which doesn't work as well when there isn't any water for them to be floating in. But these still generate at the same frequency that shipwrecks normally would, so there should be plenty of them around. If we dig on inside of here, we can also double check the chest here and see that there are buried treasure maps that do mark the way to actual buried treasure that I've also made generate in this dimension. Since there aren't beaches here, I've simply made buried treasure able to generate in the warm ocean biome, so much of this area should be covered by some buried treasures to be able to be found with these buried treasure maps. As we head up to the deserts, we'll keep an eye out for some of the other structures that I've added or modified. I haven't changed the desert pyramid spawning at all, so those should still generate pretty regularly throughout the desert here, especially since most of the world is desert. But over here in the Eroded Badlands, it's much easier to find these surface nether fossils. I call them nether fossils because they're based on the structure that generates in vanilla in the nether soul sand valleys, but they aren't an exact duplicate. You see, I could just have the nether fossil structure type able to generate in these two biomes. It's not based on dimension, it's just based on the biomes that it's listed to be able to generate in. But the nether fossil structure type has a chance for dried gas to spawn in them as part of them. They're not built into the structure, it's just part of their generation rules. But Mjmu doesn't want those dried gas in the overworld. We want to have to work for them by going to the nether. So I've simply made my own jigsaw structure type that is able to place these structures as part of their template pool without that hard-coded processor that places the dried gas. Now I did modify these structures slightly by making them just a little bit bigger so that the fossil bone blocks could be built into the ground just a little bit, since it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to just kind of be sitting on top of the terrain. Making all villages abandoned was super easy. It's just a matter of replacing the template pool so that it doesn't include any of the regular village city centers. It only includes the zombie village city centers. And that's because abandoned villages aren't technically separate structure types from regular villages. If you do /locate to find a village, you may find an abandoned village or you may find a regular village. And you can't specifically locate for only an abandoned village. The only thing that decides whether the village is abandoned or not is if it uses that abandoned town center start that then includes the template pools within its jigsaw block to generate all the other abandoned village features. Additionally, because the world border is going to be that 2000 by 2000 radius, I had to make it so that the strongholds were able to generate within that radius. So specifically, the first ring of 3 will generate roughly 800 blocks away from spawn. Right now, I'm just testing with the vanilla stronghold, but on the Wastes SMP, Mjmu is going to include the Biome Strongholds data pack, which should be a very fun surprise for my fellow Wastes SMPers. Now, however, it's time to talk about the changes I'm going to make to the deepest underground portions of the world. Since most of this area is going to be the deep dark biome with lots of skulk and things, should be very spooky, I'd really like to accentuate that visual by replacing all the deep slate that would generate here with Blackstone, thereby creating a visually distinct Blackstone layer below the deep slate layer. This should add some depth and some real visual awe to descending even deeper down in the world than one might normally in vanilla Minecraft. Now, of course, Blackstone is normally associated with the Nether, and so it's going to be interpreted as very volcanic. Let's go ahead and accentuate that even further by including lots of ores of magma to create just some really cool, like, visual icons as you're looking around the Blackstone layer. We'll pepper that as well with some perhaps smaller mounds and ores of calcite, since this is another block that Mjmu wanted to make sure was quite accessible. Of course, we'll also want to bring a lot of those other ores down here. We'll probably make them use their deep slate variant, since of course we are still deeper in the world, and it is going to be the closest visually to the Blackstone, but it will of course still stand out quite a bit. I'm thinking we'll also make sure emeralds are able to spawn down here, though they'll be less common than many of the other ores, including diamond. I also think to incentivize traveling down here for resources that we might try and incorporate raw iron and raw copper here. Iron and copper don't normally generate this far down, they don't even generate very much in the deep slate layer, but if you're able to find raw iron and raw copper particularly embedded in the terrain rather than visible, I think that will give more reason for players to mine down here. But that's probably not going to be enough visual excitement here, so I think the last thing I'll also add are some spikes of obsidian, very much like we've been adding in many of the other surface biomes. These will help pepper and decorate the underground, the deep Blackstone layer here, and make it look that much more uninviting, but also valuable. This should work very well not only with the general vibe of the Blackstone layer, but also I hope the deep dark and the ancient cities. So let's get all of that generating and see how it all comes together. Now that is cool. As you overlook the Blackstone layer from the bottom of the deep slate layer, what you thought was the deepest part of the world, and you see just this mess. I hope people get excited. I think the Blackstone works really well, especially in combination with all the skulk. They aren't a perfect one-to-one match color-wise, nor should they be. They just create that feeling of darkness. The calcite helps to break up that darkness very well and provides, again, that very important resource that we want to be relatively accessible. In addition to that calcite and these large ore blobs of magma blocks, which I think add some brightness in particular, I've also added these ore blobs of smooth basalt. I don't know that these specifically need to be as accessible as the calcite and such, but I did still want to include them because, again, they just help kind of break up the texture some more. The ores do appear to be generating very well. They certainly stand out a little bit, but they aren't incredibly common, especially higher up in the Blackstone layer, so they should just serve as a reason to come down here without kind of ruining and breaking up the aesthetic of the Blackstone layer too much. The real piece de resistance, in addition to these obsidian spikes that are dotting all around this ancient city, is all of the extra lava. Since this region of the world is very volcanic, I thought it only made sense to include more of these lava springs, and specifically lava springs that do not need blocks below them like we get in the Nether, to create almost a sensation like you're about to enter the Nether if you were to dig any deeper. In addition to those lava springs, we also have these lava lake features that are able to generate fairly commonly. Typically, they're going to be embedded in the terrain as we would normally expect from underground lava lakes in vanilla overworld, but they will try to find their way down to an available surface if they try to generate in the air first. Now, all of this that we've just been looking at is within the bounds of an ancient city, which of course do generate more commonly by virtue of there being more deep dark for them to generate in. But let's go find an area of the Blackstone layer that doesn't have an ancient city. And this gives a little bit more representative look of the kind of visuals that we can expect as you descend from the deep slate layer down into the Blackstone layer. We do still get these nice obsidian spikes, but they obviously can and will be overrun by skulk veins, at least covering them up. The skulk covers many of these surfaces, but it's really cool to see the magma blocks really peeking out from them, but they will completely convert things like calcite and smooth basalt and such. Though of course not the ores. All of this should make the Blackstone Layer feel really exciting and dangerous to explore, and very unique even outside of the deep dark and the skulk that is heavily populating it. Of course, once you get into the ancient cities, you're going to feel the full threat of both the skulk and all of that lava and additional threats that the Blackstone Layer offers. As we head back up to the surface to take a look at the final global changes that I've added to all the biomes, we can appreciate the terracotta, the Badlands surface rule, stretching just a little bit further down into the world. It is able to stretch quite a bit deeper, but when we see these sections on the ceiling like this, I think that just looks really, really cool. Now back on the surface of the world, I've made it so that warm cows, sheep, pigs, chickens, and especially horses are all able to spawn on sand. That way we can have access to these animals for food sources and other resources early on in the game. The horses in particular were a specific request from Mchmu so that everybody could be cowboys while exploring the wastes. Of course, camels and rabbits are able to spawn here still as well, but since there are so many more animals spawning here helping take up the mob cap, they may be a little bit less common than they used to be. If you do happen to find one though, you'll find that rabbits will generally drop more meat and more likely to drop rabbit hide, and camels are now also able to drop both meat and leather. I don't expect players will kill the camels very often for much the same reason that players don't tend to kill horses very often, but the opportunity still exists. I've also made it so that water is able to freeze into ice at sufficiently high altitudes in every biome so that ice can be renewable. It's probably going to be a big pain to renew, but it is an option if somebody wanted to build with it. And lastly, where normally when you grow a birch, oak, or cherry sapling next to a flower, there's a 5% chance for it to spawn with the bee nest, I've increased that chance to a 25%, though it's probably going to be really annoying for me to demonstrate that. I'll give it a try a few times here. There we go. This way, players can get access to bees and honey and all the associated blocks there without needing to search for a tree that happens to have one, which I'm not even actually sure can generate, even here in the Windswept Savanna with the oak trees that generate with no leaves. The dimension is finished and Mchmu has approved all of my changes, so it's about time to see how everybody reacts to it. Let's log on to the Wastes SMP.
Hello everybody, and everyone's streams as well. Is somebody cooking?
Someone's stuck in the vending machine.
You're the one that's cooking.
True.
Yeah.
True that.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll be here for 30 days.
Welcome everybody to the official start of the Waste. You may be wondering what you're doing here. Are you on some kind of mission to restore this world to what it once was?
Yes.
Or are you here to witness something that had been? Or perhaps you're here to find something, anything. Take care of the land and the land will take care of you. Sometimes riches lie in the most unsuspecting of places. What survives when the world is gone? Let's find out. I hereby welcome everyone to the Waste. Thank you, Kano, for this amazing world generation. If you have any questions about it, he's probably the best person to answer. I know some of the questions, but you know, if you have any questions about exploration, please ask him. Explore to your heart's content and enjoy the Waste. Make sure you drink all your water because it gets hot out here. Anyway, I'll keep it short and sweet. So
Is that it? Are we off?
We'll get started.
Okay, bye guys.
Friendship!
See ya.
Okay. I gotta see this cactus. It's so big, dude.
Are there any trees?
this way.
Trees? Yes, so you might need to
The
search for
cactus
them.
is the tree of the desert.
My top right says I need a tree.
You might not find a tree, but you will find wood. There's plenty of wood. Well, plenty is a strong word. There is wood.
Get away from my wood.
I made this wood. It's mine.
Get away! This is mine! I found it!
I put it here. Resources are scarce. We have to work together.
This is true.
All right, I've taken my first steps into the waste. I've got my early wood here, and I see other people already fanning out and grabbing petrified wood. But I gotta be careful that people don't take it from me.
I'm not following you.
That's good, because I don't know where I'm going.
I don't know what kind of currency we use here.
Yeah.
I vote for cactus.
Of value.
Probably focus on getting
But that's way too saturated a
Yeah,
currency.
here's some wood. Yes. Everyone
wood.
getting there.
Wood stealers. Shoo.
Yeah,
I prefer the term.
You're like
termites.
mosquitoes.
Thank you.
I'll take any of
Nah, I'm
the
a termite.
you know, that you're digging.
Wait, I haven't picked up any of this.
Yeah, I know, because I've got pickup privileges.
What?
Okay. I'm gonna speedrun. Wait a second. Blue
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
Blue guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all
I'm
Messy's
gonna-
name.
Kano Karab. Did I
Yeah.
say it right?
Good enough, yeah.
All right. You know your ways around these parts, right?
I do.
Okay. I am in need of sugarcane. Where
Okay.
can I find that?
So you'll need to find an ocean.
Okay.
Or at least
how
what's
do I
left
do
of
that?
one. You'll just have to go out searching.
Oh, but then I have to leave the cactus. Okay. So if I just go in a direction, I'll find the ocean.
Well, I guess I don't know about that. It depends on the seed. But there are oceans here.
Okay. Time to start walking.
Yes. I just want to grab as much wood as I can because I'm going to need, in particular, the sticks to be able to craft enough tools for all of the mining I'm going to have to do, because I'm going to need quite a few resources if I'm going to build my build. We'll keep that secret for now because I'm sure I'm not going to make hardly any progress today. Oh, this is a nice formation. Oh, and it looks like, okay, a little bit of a mistake, a mess up here with this fossil. I guess the terrain here ended up creating a very silly shape, though the disc should have stopped a lot of that. So very curious how that happened, but it's very funny if nothing else. Looks like we've got an ocean here, but I don't hear Liv, if I can let her know. And then we can maybe work together a little bit because I need the prismarine. Oh, here's some people.
No.
Hi, people.
Oh my
Hello.
god. Hello, Kano.
Welcome
Whoa.
to the ocean.
Oh,
If you say so.
that is sick. Okay, I
There's a
see
cave.
exposed loot. I see exposed loot.
Yeah, these ocean
Dead
ruins are
rain
sick.
coral. The cobblestone of the building world.
Because nothing will ever be good enough.
I got
Hello,
a
silly
cherry
little.
sapling and a treasure map.
What is this drowned doing?
There's a drowned with a trident right
Is he
in front of
sitting in a bed? What?
I immediately broke a
him. Ow! Okay, well he's throwing his trident.
I got a pale oak sapling.
Yo!
Nice.
What
Okay,
is
I have
this?
one dark oak
Is
and
he
one
dead?
pale oak.
Oh, it's a nautilus.
We
It's a
combine
zombie
our
nautilus.
forces.
Oh, it's a zombie. What?
I guess it spawned as part of the structure.
This is my first time actually seeing one of these.
Oh no, wait, these guys drown, I think.
He hasn't
Oh,
drowned
buddy,
yet.
I'm so
That's pretty
sorry.
impressive.
This is sick.
Wait,
More
do
loot.
they drown? Or do they just catch on fire in the
Yo,
daylight?
stone spear.
I don't know.
Oh,
Heck
baby.
yeah.
Okay, so I do have one dark oak and one pale oak.
I
If
found
we
myself a
combine
buried
some forces
treasure
here,
map.
We might be in business.
Yeah, I got a cherry sapling, an acacia sapling, and a spruce one.
I've got
Now
a
I've got
birch
two
one.
spruce ones. Oh, nice. Okay,
I'm
we're
gonna
in
hunt down this
business.
buried treasure before somebody else does. Gotta keep that to myself. Few secrets are gonna be just for me, at least to start with. Also grab those bones in a second, but gotta prioritize the buried treasure because I don't know where, if anybody else might have found some maps. So let's see. 8, 9, okay, I think right here. So if I dig down here, we should spot, yes, all of my beautiful buried treasure. Oh, there's some exposed stone. I'm gonna grab that while I'm here. Ooh, nice big cave. Oh yes, of course they're pretty much all big here, but still. There's a few people still kinda nearby, but it looks like most everybody is back off towards spawn, which is very interesting. I guess it does make sense they'd want to stay together, but I needed to make a beeline for the ocean because my build plans require large quantities of prismarine. So I want to make sure I know where that is. But it's going to be a while before I'm going to actually go and collect it all. Definitely going to want quite a lot better tools. Let's go to the shipwreck and see if it's already gotten looted. Sick. All right. Lots of loot here. Lovely. Everybody else had just as equal chance to find this stuff as I did, but I certainly had the advantage of knowing that there were shipwrecks and buried treasure to find. Let's go down here. I don't really want to excavate this right now, so maybe I'll just find a nice place to set up some camp. Maybe I'll even set up camp at this shipwreck. That could be fun. Gosh, the ocean just looks gorgeous at night. I didn't really take a long look at the world at night while I was creating it, but the sea lanterns just add so much. This is definitely way more peaceful than the rest of the wastes. But even though I need a lot of prismarine, I'm not actually sure I'm going to build my build here. I am going to want a sign, certainly, so that I can mark this as my territory. I would hope that nobody's going to actually steal things from one another. Captain Kano's.
Ahoy, Capitan! You can't park there!
I've just had to pull over for a little bit. Welcome to Captain Kano's Ship Shack.
Oh,
Actually,
wow,
let's go
it.
Ship Shape Shack.
I love what you've done with the place. Very, contemporary.
Yes. Won't be my permanent home, but I need somewhere to stash all my stuff while I'm gathering resources.
For sure, love it. Here's a little housewarming gift for you. That's
lovely.
Straight from a desert temple.
Nice. Already found one?
Yeah. And Cinna was not happy about it.
Yeah.
I've already found some buried treasure.
Nice. I do have a treasure map.
Nice.
Ooh, cactus juice makes you nauseous.
Oh, that tracks. It's the quenchiest.
Oh, God. Whoa.
Did you find a feather
I've-
in the chest here, perchance?
I've not found a feather, but I haven't excavated the lower chest, so there might be in there.
Got it. Okay. Because chat just brought up the good idea of making a brush so we could try to get sniffer eggs.
Yes,
Ooh,
true.
there you go.
So there are both cold and warm ocean ruins in this dimension.
I'm gonna break your landscape a little bit.
Yes,
here.
that's totally
as will
fine.
I.
Mikasa
Okay,
Sukasa.
and I will not steal from you, but I will say, Mr. Lane, you have, not Mr. Lane, sorry, Mr. Kano, you have a cherry sapling and a mangrove sapling here. So
I
you're
do
kinda set.
indeed. Well, I don't have a mangrove.
And
Oh, I
carrots.
see. You're checking down there. Yeah. Feel free to
I
take
shall
it.
I
take
found
one
feathers.
carrot as compensation for excavating, and then I will bury it back in there for you.
Wonderful.
There you
There's
go.
another treasure map. Sick. Okay. We're doing good.
And then you have the copper as well from over there.
Yeah, I just gotta cook it if you still have the furnace.
There's a geode over there as well if you need the amethyst.
I did not pick up the.
There's a geode over where?
Over that way, just on that hill
I didn't
there.
pick up the furnace or the crafting table.
Just
I'll
over
be right
there? Okay.
Yeah, see that darker spot on the ground?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna let him go get that furnace. I'll be back.
Nice. So I think probably at this point, I'm going to need to go underground, start gathering plenty more iron, as well as those all-important diamonds, so that I can start truly collecting all the prismarine that I'm going to need. Oh, you know what? I'm going to get a bucket as well, because I'm going to want to bring the water up. In fact, I'm going to make 2. So let's see. I'll probably just go into this cave here, assuming it's not going to be directly below water. Okay, so... Oh, there's a mushroom cave down here. Lovely. Oh, and some water directly below me, I think. Let's head down there. Ooh. Okay, lovely. There's also some mushrooms down here, so I'm glad that they are spawning. I didn't bring a wooden bowl, so there's nothing I can really do with them, but I will grab some of these regular mushrooms so that I can make mushroom stew later. As I suspect, early on, that's probably going to be the best food source that I have once all my fish runs out. We, of course, are going to need lots of iron, which I think should still generate fairly commonly around this Y level, where the stone layer becomes the deep slate layer. I'd really love to find some more people. Of course, it's probably going to be more likely up on the surface, so I might do kind of a basic build for just today, and then over the course of the SMP, I'll actually work on my intended build. If all goes well, maybe that'll be a bonus episode on Patreon, or perhaps even on YouTube if you guys are excited for it. Let's see if any diamonds. Oh, yep, a little bit of diamond visible there. I think that'll be pretty easy to go and get if I just dig down towards it. And I think it has a block below it, so I shouldn't have to worry about anything there. Yep, great. And we've even got a couple of diamonds. So a little bit of water down there I could dig down into. And I'm also, ultimately I will need more Blackstone. But again, no point in collecting that right now because we need quite a lot. So we're just going to go deeper primarily to find more diamonds. And they should be fairly common down in the Blackstone layer, or at least easier to spot. Carefully make our way down there. And I've got my buckets, of course, so I can travel down. Oh, there's tons of diamonds over there. Absolutely, let's go grab that. So there's those diamonds there, and then there's some on that hill, I think. Oh, there's tons of diamonds down here. Fantastic. I guess that's just a consequence of making the world deeper. You end up getting a lot more space for those existing diamond ore features to generate, which is frankly ideal for an SMP of this size. And especially with how limited the early game resources are, those late game resources are all the more important. More diamonds down there. Let's go ahead and water bucket clutch this. Nice. We got over there lots more diamonds, and it looks like another ocean. I've already got some sugarcane, and that should be enough to start a small farm, but I suppose I'll grab some more on my way up if I need to. But I definitely want enough diamonds for diamond armor, just in case. Even though there don't seem to be a lot of hostile mobs due to the number of players on the server, it'll still be good to not get caught by surprise. And then obviously we need enough resources to actually have a sufficient quantity of diamond tools. 30 diamonds, that's probably not quite enough. We're making good progress, so I'm not too worried about spending a little more time down here. Oh, and worth it, because there's plenty more. Somebody's in the nether already, my goodness. Oh, it's Ryan. Yep, that tracks. I think I've got enough diamonds, at least for the moment. We're gonna have to come back down here later in order to gather all of the deep resources that we need. So, in the meantime, this diamonds will help us collect at least those materials as well as some more diamonds later down the line. And we'll also gather up most of the prismarine that we need, I imagine, as well. Back on the surface, I've got my stone spear and need to make my way back to my shipwreck, which is this away. This away. Spears are fun. This away. You should subscribe. Ooh, a creaking. Oh, that's so cool. Nice. Oh, I see. Oh, there's resin. Oh, I'm gonna grab it. Ow, okay. They're faster than I thought. I'm not gonna grab like a ton of resin. Is it just 4 for a single block? No, it's probably 9. So we'll grab just enough for a single block. We can have it as a trophy. Ow! Relax, bro. I am looking at you, I promise. Good, good creaking. It shouldn't be able to travel very far from... Ooh. Okay, yep, that's a cactus. Very far from its creaking heart, but 32 blocks is pretty far, so we'll need to back up carefully here. Okay, cool. We'll leave that for somebody else to deal with. I really wish I could see somebody's first reaction to a creaking, but that might be hard to do. So is cactus juice? Okay, cool. It is the quenchiest. I am gonna get nauseous, but I need the food right now. Oh, it takes forever to drink too. That's not great, but that's okay. It does restore my hunger, and that's what I need right now. I think that's the ship shack down there. So I'm gonna carefully go down here while I'm nauseous. That lasts 8 seconds. Oh my gosh. And okay, nice. I've got the skills. All right. We are back home. All right. Back from the mining trip, and at the ship-shaped shack, we have clearly full diamond, diamond pickaxe, diamond shovel, and a few diamonds left over should we need to replace these tools, which I'm certain that we will, because we don't have an enchanting setup yet. We do have the sugarcane farm going, though I don't have any lapis lazuli yet, and obviously we don't have any obsidian, though that shouldn't be too hard to collect once we go down and start gathering all the blackstone and stuff that I need for my build, because there will be lots of lava down in the Blackstone layer. For the moment though, I think this is a very successful start to the Wastes SMP. I'm so excited to continue to play on here with all of the other creators that you can find linked in the description. If you do want to see more of my gameplay here on the Wastes SMP, do let me know in the comments. I am going to be recording the rest of my experience here on the Wastes SMP, probably primarily for my Patreon supporters, but if you were excited to watch here on YouTube as well, definitely let me know in the comments, because I would love to share this with you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go talk to some other people and see what they think about the Wastes so far. If you've enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe for more custom worldgen, structures, and data pack content. I'll be releasing the Wastes worldgen data pack after the Wastes SMP has completed, so be sure to check out everyone else's videos as they explore this custom world. If you'd like to support the channel and participate in these NPC fights at the end of every video, please consider joining my Patreon. Congratulations to today's winner, Randall Clausen, and thanks for watching!